But then if I think of 1, 2, 3, 4, starting back, then pretty soon you can cycle in and out. You could also do this at a different pace. You could perhaps try to do 6 going up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm sort of cycling at a different rate. But as you're learning the technique, I recommend doing it in groups of 4, which means that's why it says 9 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. like this. And but let's see, the last piece of video I'll show, and then I'll stick to demonstration piano, is the vibrato exercise in trill format. So I think that's actually right here.
Created trills uses the vibrato technique. One finger in a trilling pair gently rests on either the key surface or the key bed. The other repeatedly plays its note by cycling in and out, 4 notes at a time. We reverse the process, allowing the other finger to play while doing the vibrato motion. Then, the trill emerges as both fingers are activated, while the arm continues cycling in both the up and down and in and out planes of motion.
Okay, I think I'll stick to live demonstration from here because time's going quickly. So the vibrato motion, working on in tremolos, especially in, say, in the left hand, where you're used to having the bottom note to the top. So these are, since we have opposable hands, we more often than not in the repertoire we have figures like this or this, as opposed to, and the same thing in the right hand. Consider that it usually originates from the thumb. This, but it's not impossible, and there's places like in the Brahms G minor piano quartet where you do have the figure that originates from above as opposed to below. But the vibrato motion, if you practice by alternating, again, here's a quiet hand. I'm just using a very small interval to play, say, a fifth, but if I go, you can alternate between them, and then if you use the same technique of cycling in and out, pretty soon you can do the same thing. You see how trills and tremolos are related. The most famous example that we hear often played like something like this. How many people have heard this piece played something like this? It gets slower and slower and slower, and often you see that often just fingers, these 3 fingers are up in the air, and it's kind of like it's a little, bad Billy Joel. It's slower and slower. So if you think of approaching it the same way, you have this kind of if the hand's loose and you're getting this in 8th notes, then you can alternate between that and the 16ths again. Because I think that, we want to hear this as the pulse. It's in metrically strong position. We don't really want to hear this anyhow. So being able to focus that and use only the amount of effort that's needed at the moment is what's going to allow you to be able to do that. Again, cycling in and out, you can do different groups of vibrato. I said that, for example, you could do 3 at a time. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You could do 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You could do 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a lot harder at 8, I think. I mean, but I actually just had the pleasure of playing the Brahms G minor concerto last weekend, and for that, Mr. Fleischer was conducting it, and he was saying on this passage that goes between the strings and the piano, he was actually advocating for a single gesture on every single eighth. So I was grouping them like this originally. The right notes. And so I was trying to get groupings, and he actually wanted them shaken out on every note. So this is a shakeout technique to go. So every because of what's happening in the orchestra. I think that's a rare example of really having to be a jackhammer on every note. It's much easier to group notes into other subdivisions, so you're getting more notes for free. Okay, so if we look at the examples, a couple specific examples. The Mozart Minuet KF has the same kind of fingering trick that we'll see in Mozart K545 and also K332. which is, we can use fingerings where we might start out with a 2 and then go on to, say, a turn fingering. So especially look at measure 11. I'm playing that with 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1. So that's an example of integrating other fingers so that it just becomes a figure that is not a traditional trill on just 2 fingers. And so for time's sake, I probably won't go into great detail. I'll just point out what some of the examples are for. I included this very rudimentary example. I don't mean that the music is rudimentary, but it's sort of a nascent trill in my view, that if you start out with a 2-3-2 here at the beginning, the upbeat of the Schubert-Ländler, that this little figure is actually the beginnings of a trill. It's not. But if this can be done well with all the elements that I talked about earlier, with the quiet hand, lift and drop, it's not that far from that to this, right? Same thing with the tremolo figure that's showing up at the end of it. So for this figure, again, there's 3-dimensional adjustment taking place, and it's not just merely like this, which we often hear, which is also very fingery. It doesn't group the music into what is needed as well. If you group it in the way that Schubert has set it up, we have the hierarchy of the downbeat being respected, and it integrates with the other arm, with the body integrates with the music very easily then. I'm going to skip over the graph. You see the Willard Palmer edition of the Bach first little prelude in C. The way he's written out these ornaments, I actually think is quite nice. So sometimes you have these trill figures or ornament figures that are in Baroque context where they tend to be measured. And so this is a good place to practice slower trills. We have an example of a tremolo figure emerging in the Beethoven Sonatina in F, and in measure 7 here we have, so this kind of figure, or the very last measure that's shown is that sort of figure, which we'll see again in Mozart K545 shortly, is again the same sort of movement that needs to be cycled in and out. The Clementi Sonatina in G, the third movement, which was in the video also, that figure, I provided a smaller hand fingering of going 5-5-4. You could do 5-4-3, which many people do, but if the hand is smaller, you want to keep it small, just let it release right away and come to a quiet position. And the same thing could go in the other direction on the last line. And then finally we also have a trill and a tremolo at the end of it. Much slower trills and tremolos, much slower tremolos than, say, what we had in the Pathetique Sonata. If you turn the page to K545, you have the famous trill example here, and I just want to show you a few other possibilities. Look at what the editor did at the top there. The editor put, right? And that's not really that doesn't sound so well. If you're going to do a sort of a 5 that maybe has just a little bit of dare I say, rubato in it, that seems possible, but if it's just 5 notes, listen to what that sounds like. To me, that sounds a little slow, it seems a little square. So 2 ways that you can get around this. First of all, I would suggest the fingering of doing 3, let's say 2, 5, I would play 2. And first of all, we have to deal with the issue of having a auxiliary note or starting on the principal note. Okay, in the classical period, more often than not, in Mozart and Haydn, we start on the auxiliary note from above, except possibly when the previous note was the auxiliary note. I often find my standard for what it sounds like is, does it sound good, does it sound elegant? And if it's been a while since the last attack took place, and for me this is enough time, that I could decide to play the G again, then it would be, I would use the fingering 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2. So you'd have basically a sextuple here. 1, 2. And if the hand, notice what my 4th finger and 5th finger are doing. And if you said nothing, that's good. Because the problem often is in this place is that students will tense up and play like this, or just go, and it makes it very hard to play. So either you can play it as a sextuplet, putting the G with the D in the bass. So, or this is another great trick, is delay the right hand's note by making the D the note on the left hand's note, the one on the beat, and then play just a quintup with it up top. So go. So therefore you're getting in slow motion that way. So I personally like to add the auxiliary note one more time, but either of these I think works in context. You see down in the later on in the same movement, this figure is also just basically a trill figure that emerges into a kind of tremolo figure once you have at least a third, right? So it's a measured trill. But if you use the same techniques I talked about earlier, where you're cycling in and out as opposed to using just fingers, then it becomes easy. Etc. I'll skip over the Diabelli, the Reinica. I think I'll move on. You did hear Ferdiza also in the, these are nice tremolo figures that often we find that people, when they want to play the A section so badly, and then they get bollocksed up when they get to the B section. It's kind of beyond what they think they can actually do technically. Well, if they actually play it with cycling motions and sort of work together with both sort of one octave arpeggio technique and scalar technique, and then switching to there's clearly rotation is involved, but you're playing even these. If I play with all thumbs in the third measure, or 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Basically, I'm creating a shape with my hand and my arm as well, not playing just with rotation. That's not going to be shaped quite as well. Here's the same figures of the trill in Mozart's Sonata in F, K332. This is a brilliant trill if you use the 2-1, 4-3-2-1 fingering. And you can actually do it also here if you look carefully. I would start with 4 and go 2, 3 in the left hand. Because often we hear that where the editor put a 3-5, so that would often be done like this, and I'll play it with a little more tension. Right? So it could be done with 3-5, but it's so much easier to keep the hand quiet and move from 2-1 to 4-3-2-1. Notice again, I've just dragged the fifth finger along the surface of the key as I play this, and then it's really quite easy. The Mendelssohn spinning song. That's a different spot. So here we have same sort of thing. It's much faster, but it's again cycling 3 at a time, usually bump, bump, bump. So you could practice this going bump, 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 and then put the other ones in. Maybe alternate between until you can do all of those. Or the easier ones here. Same thing. This is basically like just going bump, 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 and then you cycle that in with the other note, and it becomes so much easier. There's our spot earlier from the Haptik Sonata. If I jump down to the slow movement of the Emperor Concerto, I already heard a long trill that I played in the Opus 111. This is another famous one where people often feel like their arm is going to fall off. Actually, I was fortunate to hear the story. It's actually in Leon Fleischer's book, but last week he told the story of he made the mistake of saying to Eugene Ormandy at the end of the second movement of the Rachmaninoff second concerto that he got down to this trill, and he wanted to get down to pianissimo, and in rehearsal he said, "Maestro, would it be okay to have a little more time?" Because he cut him off. So in the performance, he got down to, he's here, and he gets down to here, and he looks up, and Ormandy doesn't even have the in other words, they really were that mean, and like you don't question the great ego, right? And so he said his hand felt like it was about to fall off because it was pianissimo as well. Well, this is the problem with places like this. Anyhow, he said blessedly at some point the flutes came in, but it was a painful moment and a lesson in how you dealt with egos of the day. In this passage here, if you cycle in and out, you'll notice that I'm changing fingers as well. But in fact, and there's maybe places where there's what we call co-contraction. So sometimes one of the other fingers is actually moving for a moment. But the idea is to keep cycling in and out. Because otherwise, by the time you get to here, you will feel like your hand is about to fall off. But if you cycle in and out, you can trill almost all day. So, and that's that. I think I've played you see the other examples we had with the Rachmaninoff, that's sort of, this is just a similar sort of moving in and out as well. I know time's probably gone. I don't even know what the time is right now, but are there any questions? Yes?
Do you have any tips for explaining this to little kids without getting too big in the general?
Yes.